Good morning. Great. You guys in Africa get up really early. The maid knocked on my door at 7 a.m. this morning. It was a shock. You probably can hear from my accent, those of you who know the UK, that I'm from Scotland. And I'll show you this image of this guy here, because he's also from Scotland. Does anybody know who this is? This is Alexander Graham Bell, and he invented the telephone. So it's appropriate in a way that a Scots person comes to Africa. I wonder what he would have made of his invention spreading throughout the world. What I'd like you to do, you've been taught that a lot last night and this morning. I'd like you to do something for me. I'd like you to hold up your left hand. I mean everybody, even the guys at the back here. Okay, everybody? Okay, now I want you to turn to the person next to you and pretend that in the middle of their hand there's a doorbell, a buzzer, and I want you to press that doorbell. Press the doorbell on the person next to you. Okay, guys? Now I have a question for you. How many of you pressed the doorbell with your index finger, the first finger? Hands up. That's almost everybody. How many people use the thumb? Couple? Okay. Well, a guy from Intel has been doing research on this from Japan back across into Europe and came up with a very interesting conclusion. If you were all 13-year-olds, it would be the other way around. You'd be using your thumb. Why do you think you would be using your thumb? Texting. Also, especially boys, the use of games consoles. They constantly text. And indeed, baby boomers, you know, my generation, we're definitely the finger people. Generation Y, definitely the thumb people. Now, I asked my two boys, my two teenage boys, this question, and this was their reaction. You know something? Because they don't give a damn what we think. We're just old guys, you know, it doesn't really matter to them. Because something really profound has happened. The notion of the compliant learner, these guys are just lapping up the technology. They don't really care what we think, but we have to be careful. The Prime Minister mentioned the spectacle of hallucination. We must be quite careful with this technology, because we have to look carefully at what these kids are doing with it. Because they really are using it in a different way from the way which we may imagine. They're using the calculators with their thumbs. I never ever saw that at school. These are my kids when they were 2 years old. They're twin boys. Okay, on the back of my, so this is before school. They were really happy. They didn't know what was coming. This was them about 8 years old. Notice already the little silver objects in their hands. You couldn't prize those objects out of their hands. They were already, look at the engagements they have already at that age, 8 years old. This was them about 10, 11, upgraded to laptops. They never ever used pen and pencil by this age for their schoolwork. In fact, if you gave them a pen, they would look at it as if it were an Egyptian artifact. You are joking? You use this? And of course, this has shaped their educational experience. Of course, they get a bit older. Having twins is really expensive. You have to buy 2 of them. By this time, little mobile devices were coming in. They were telling me what mobile device or mobile phone I would buy for them. I never asked my dad. My dad would have clipped me around the ear if I asked him to buy me anything. A little bit older, iPods, phones, you name it, they had it. Of course, the Mac was the cool thing for them at this age. Now, this tablet in the middle is interesting because they don't use the tablet. They hate tablets. Kids don't buy tablets. They buy laptops and they buy smartphones. A really interesting thing in the US and Europe is that kids are not buying cars. The number of kids who are registering for driving licenses has dropped dramatically in the US and Europe. The reason for this is cars, those big shiny objects that we used to buy, are too damn expensive with insurance. They'd much rather spend their money on smartphones. So it's dropped from in the US from about 69% to 50% of 17-year-olds applying for driving licenses. This is my kids now at 19, twin boys, and everything collapsed into one device for them because this does everything, this iPhone. You know, and almost everything else has been abandoned. And that's the stage we've come to. But let's look at what really, really matters with mobile technology. Because we've been around a long time in this planet, and we've got to this stage where we have these little boxes in our ears, but mobile technology isn't that new. And indeed here, in Africa, the very first piece of technology that we as a species invented was the stone axe. And for 1,700,000 years, this was the dominant piece of technology for mankind. We're all Africans. And it's interesting, when you look, I found one of these just a few miles from my home in southern England. It's an amazingly comfortable thing to hold in your hand, a Neolithic stone axe. It's very comfortable, just like a mobile phone. And indeed, there ain't much difference, guys, when you look at the shape. And maybe the mobile is the normal Stone Age axe. But something very odd about Stone Age axes. There are tens of thousands of these things found all over the world, and many of them are in pristine condition, have never been used. Some of them, like these ones, these were found in Africa, are 1 foot and 2 foot tall. Why is that? That's because we've recently discovered that many of these axes weren't used at all. They were status objects. It was great to own an axe, just as it's great to own an iPhone. Now that's interesting, because speak to any teenager and they will tell you, you know how much status matters to them. And the research shows this. Status matters. When you're implementing an eLearning project, be careful on this one, because you may be forcing things that young people do not want to do with their cool devices. You know, it may be that mobile devices are too cool for school. I remember trying to negotiate with Sony and investing a large sum of money into games on the Sony PlayStation, and the marketing guy went, no way, Jose. I am not allowing school on the Sony PlayStation. My brand is all about being cool. School is not cool. So be careful about mobile technology. And there's a great book on this by an academic called Jeffrey Miller, if you're interested in following up in detail. The second thing that the research points to is, don't imagine that on these little devices you're going to be delivering big, long-winded courses or 6 or 10-week MOOCs from higher education. It just won't happen. That's not what these devices are around. The average time that a young person spends on their mobile is 7 seconds. You're not going to deliver a huge amount of learning in 7 seconds, and that's how short it is. It's very episodic, and this is largely because of texting. You know, kids don't use voice much. If I want to speak to my 19-year-old son who's traveling at the moment, you know, I could speak to him on the phone and he will grunt back to me, or I could text to him and get a reasonable conversation. And look for a moment at this graph, because this is important. The red area here is how most of us actually learn. We don't go on courses all the time. We learn informally. We learn online, we learn from our colleagues at work, our colleagues in our institutions, books, you name it, we learn informally. And yet, the great big blue graph on the other side shows that the actual spend in our countries, whether it be in companies or in education, is all informal learning. In other words, we spend all our money on courses, and yet we know that most of us learn most of the time informally. And this is the rub. This is where mobile learning comes to bear. Because the little orange bits there, you go to school, you may go to college and university. For the rest of your life, you don't really spend a lot of time in formal schooling and formal courses. So we must look to mobile technology in an informal sense, because in this beautiful little black box, I sometimes bring my iPhone out just to look at it. You know? Stroke it, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's great idea. But it's full of marvelous things. It has the calculator, GPS, it's my map, spell check, dictionary, thesaurus, translation, it has a camera, it's 101 things that can help you learning. But it's an aid to learning. It's not the primary learning device itself. This is important to regard the mobile as a sidekick. And in a sense, the mobile device is a GPS for learning. It points you in the right direction, helps you when you get stuck, but it isn't the primary device for learning. Although, again, I think the Prime Minister was on the ball last night when he said, look in Africa towards vocational learning. Don't get stuck with our over-expensive American, European model of $9,000 to $20,000, even in Ivy League, $60,000 a year system. You must look for cheaper solutions, vocational learning, and mobile technology allows you to learn out there while you're doing real jobs. Another really fascinating set of projects on the go in mobile is the fact that last night, you will already have forgotten, the great German psychologist of learning showed us in 1885 that you forget almost everything you hear. If you try and recall what you saw in the plenary last night, you will have forgotten almost everything. You will forget almost everything I'm telling you today. Because we forget. The forgetting curve is science. How do we stop the forgetting curve? By repeated practice. We give you another bit of information across time, and that moves knowledge from short to long-term memory. And that's what mobile devices are good at. It may be that mobile devices do something very radical in learning, not delivering courses, but really boosting our memories in a way we've never seen before, because that doesn't happen in school. A third thing in the research is be careful with video. Kids don't watch a lot of video on their mobile phones. It's too small. And just because it's media rich does not mean it's mind rich. I was in Namibia in 2007, and you have some really cool cats here in Namibia. You know, lions, cheetahs, leopards, I saw them all. It was absolutely fantastic. And really the only thing that people in Europe and the US seem to use video for on social media is cats, but they have really crap cats in Europe. They're pets, and let me show you an example of the sort of things that kids share on video. Now that's one stupid cat. But don't be fooled into thinking that kids use video for anything more than those little bits of fun, you know? And another fascinating piece of research by NASA and Reeves at Stanford showed that the smaller the screen, the lower the retention, so be careful with the use of these small devices. If it's true that small screens lower retention, we may be inhibiting learning by the excessive use of small devices. And the two great researchers in eLearning, Clark and Mayer, who found out that actually video may be a distraction a lot of the time when you're looking at core learning in subjects like maths, numeracy, and literacy. And if you look at Simon Can's 4,000 videos for free on YouTube on mathematics and other subjects, 257 million downloads. This stuff's really popular. You never see his face on video. You never see the lecturer. Because what we have learned from kids who use YouTube is that that doesn't matter. You have to go to the message. If you're teaching the maths, show the maths. We don't want to see the teacher. That's just cognitive noise. It's semantic memory we need to go for. Another thing is the underuse of audio. I have in my pocket, I often used to wonder what this little pocket and jeans were for, you know, keep putting there, this happening. And I always keep this here, which is my iPod, which has 500 hours of podcasting in science and philosophy, my favourite subject, religion and so on, and I'm never bored when I have this little device. Don't imagine that small devices need to have the high-end video media. Audio is cool. And if Apple come out with the iWatch, you may find that you have a huge amount of audio available to listen to. Remember, with audio, you can use your imagination. You have your hands free for taking notes. Note-taking increases retention by about 20 to 30%. This really matters in learning. Audio is a wonderful medium, massively underused. What do kids do in their mobile phones? They listen to music all the time. They're sensitive to audio. They understand audio. It's a low bandwidth, low storage, easy to distribute, easy to produce. And of course, we have Google Glass coming along. Absolutely fascinating, because here, natural language processing, remember, this is the mobile device of the future, if it becomes socially acceptable. Just behind your ear here, they have a patented bone vibration technology, so that you will hear what's coming through Google Glass. You will be able to speak to it. This is the sort of thing that's happening. Audio will really matter in the future. And there's a very good example in England of a school who had a massive increase in exam results just using podcasts, just using audio. So don't forget that medium. Research number 5, text rules. Text really matters. We have, and this always amazes me when I reflect on it, we have had an absolute renaissance in reading and writing amongst young people. Because my kids text every 10 minutes. They write all the time. When I was their age, I wrote nothing. I only ever wrote in school. Not only do they write all the time, they read all the time. Just because they don't read the long novels that I read doesn't mean to say they're not reading. They just read differently. And of course, nothing is new here in terms of these small devices which we use to read and write. Then look at these beautiful cuneiform tablets that one would hold in one's hand. Not much difference between those and the iPhone. And of course, the marvelous book Books are still cool, you know, don't forget that this is still easily by a million miles the most popular mobile learning device on the planet. And we don't need to dispense with those. Although we do have Kindles if you want to store 10,000 books. That's great, you don't have to carry them all around with you. And almost every one of these media here are text-based. Okay, research number 6. Think comms, not content. Don't be developing huge amounts of content for mobile devices because they're fundamentally communication devices. And in the last 10 years, we may have, this might sound like an exaggeration, we may have had more pedagogical change in the last 10 years than the last 1,000 years, the last 10,000 years. The reason for that is all these things. Look at this, Google, iTunes, Wikipedia, Blogger, Facebook, LinkedIn, Dropbox, Instagram, Google+, all of it in the last decade. This is what kids are using on their mobile devices. And don't forget that on this very continent, it was social media that was a necessary condition for the Arab Spring. Blogging, Facebook, Twitter. Mobile devices. It's no accident that this happened in Tunisia because they had a massive penetration of mobile devices in a very young population, similarly in Egypt. And when it comes to social media, don't underplay, don't think this is just trivial. These are the sort of things you might find. I'm trying to get a view of social media that's more expansive. Twitter is like, I need to pee. Your short message. Facebook is I peed. You're reporting back. Foursquare, I know where you are. This is where I pee. Quora is a question thing. Why am I peeing? YouTube, look at this pee, man. And then we have LinkedIn. I'm pretty good at peeing, you know. And then social media covers all those things. It's not just trivial little things like I had a cup of tea last night. Nobody ever says that on Twitter. That's something that only people, 50-year-old people at dinner parties say. And then we had that marvelous presentation on blogging. Don't forget blogging. This is where kids really write an anger. Get your teachers creating what I taught this week blogs. Get your learners doing learner blogs. They will be writing, they will be remembering things. There's repeated practice in terms of long-term memory. Facebook, there are people using Facebook in anger. If you want to find young students, there's 1 billion people on Facebook. Where are they going to be? Are you going to find them in your lecture halls, or are you going to find them on Facebook? Go to where the students are. A friend of mine really uses Facebook with her students. She blogs. Her students blog. She has the applications up the side here, which you can see, SlideShare, Google Docs, YouTube, all that jazz. And there are brilliant documents, this one, Facebook for Education. And then we have Twitter. Why is Twitter such a marvelous educational tool? Because everything in the psychology of learning says that less is more. Less is more. I'm currently building a maths course in Twitter, which works marvelously because the kids are not overloaded. They're not subjected to cognitive overload. Wikipedia, it's all text, but it's great. Who doesn't use Wikipedia? Google, mostly text. And my last point here, research on device decisions. Be very careful with people who want to sell you tablets. Be very careful. Because mobile devices come in all sorts of shapes and forms, but if you're teaching literacy or maths, do you think tablets are the solution to our problem? When I went around the exhibition yesterday, Mark showed you, he didn't show you tablets, he showed you laptops with keyboards. And there's a good reason for that, because if you do want to learn to write, you will need a keyboard. If you do want to learn to code, you will need a keyboard. If you do want to use Photoshop, you will need a keyboard. If you're an adult and sophisticated learner, you will need a keyboard. Why? Because typing on touchscreens is about 20 to 30% slower, you make too many mistakes, and it will inhibit your learning style, and kids start to write less, shorter sentences, and don't develop the writing if you just use tablets. It's okay in preschool and with younger kids in secondary school. Be careful with tablets. There have been some disaster stories in the UK with them going back out of the classroom. They're very teacher unfriendly. That's not what Mark showed you, I'm not contradicting it. Mark rightly showed you the ones with the keyboards here. Okay, I'm just wrapping up. So, you know, just because it's a little shiny object doesn't mean to say it's good. It can be quite dangerous, guys. Learning first, devices second. This is the Pope's inauguration in 2005. Look at the difference here in 2013. It's everywhere, this stuff. And this is my last slide. Now, this looks like a map, but it isn't a map. This is just an intern in Facebook who mapped the Facebook mobile connections across the world. So there is no map here. But the map emerges from the data, and that's because we are all in one world. You can see as I'm going to put down here, you can see that Africa's part of the same world. That's what's changed here. And don't imagine that you're going to ignore this technology, because resistance is absolutely futile. The kids have it, they will use it, and they will tell you how you're going to use it, but be careful. And I'll end on that point. Thank you very much for listening.